It was mid-November of 2022, and I'd been driving for hours through the lonely, winding roads of northern Wisconsin. I was heading home after visiting friends, eager to cut down my journey by taking a route through dense pine forests I'd never tried before. The late afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, strange shadows across the narrow, deserted road. My phone's GPS had become patchy an hour earlier, flickering in and out of service until finally going completely silent. Still, I convinced myself I knew the general direction. My gas tank was nearly full, and the comforting hum of the car engine reassured me against any creeping unease. As night settled in, the woods around me thickened. The road became narrower, and darkness swallowed everything beyond the faint reach of my headlights. The trees loomed tall and ghostly, branches stretching out like skeletal arms over the road, blocking any moonlight that might have offered comfort. With each passing mile, an odd feeling settled over me, a strange sensation of isolation, as if I had left civilization behind entirely. I drove cautiously, eyes fixed forward, trying to ignore the gnawing sense of vulnerability creeping slowly through my veins. Without warning, my headlights flickered slightly. A quick flutter, brief enough to convince myself it was a trick of tired eyes. But then, moments later, they dimmed again, this time lingering before returning to full strength. Panic started to trickle through my chest. The road was too narrow to pull off safely, and turning around seemed impossible without risking a collision with trees or slipping into the steep embankment lining the road. Just as my mind raced through possibilities, my headlights sputtered once more, flickered violently, and then died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. My heart slammed against my ribs as I fumbled desperately for my phone's flashlight, barely illuminating the dashboard. The car engine suddenly sputtered as well, coughing roughly before stalling, bringing me to a complete stop in the pitch-black wilderness. Hands trembling, I attempted to restart the engine, but it refused even to turn over, leaving me stranded alone in the silent, oppressive night. Stepping outside cautiously, the chill immediately gripped my bones, sharp and unwelcoming. The air felt unnaturally still, devoid of the usual forest sounds I'd expect. No wind rustling leaves, no nocturnal creatures scurrying nearby. Just suffocating silence, broken only by my rapid breathing. I lifted my phone, desperately trying to find a signal, but the screen offered nothing but a harsh no-service warning. Suddenly, from the darkness behind me, a faint rustling emerged, subtle at first, but undeniably close. My blood froze, heart hammering uncontrollably. I spun quickly, directing my weak phone flashlight toward the trees. The shadows danced erratically as I searched frantically for the source of the noise. Nothing appeared, yet the feeling of being watched intensified, prickling the skin at the back of my neck. Instinct screamed at me to get back inside the car. Slamming the door shut, I locked it instantly, desperately willing my trembling fingers to stop shaking. Yet the quiet scraping continued, now coming from beneath the vehicle itself. A scratching sound, gentle at first, then growing more aggressive, as if something were clawing desperately to get inside. Fear consumed me as I sat frozen in place, too terrified to move, let alone check what lurked beneath my car. Minutes stretched into eternity, and the scratching abruptly stopped, leaving me in terrifying silence once more. I strained my ears, hoping whatever it was had left. But just as my heartbeat slowed slightly, I felt a gentle, steady tap against my window, deliberate and rhythmic. Slowly, I turned my head, feeling dread twist violently in my stomach. A pale, gaunt face stared directly at me from inches away, pressed against the window pane. Hollow eyes fixed intently upon mine, mouth opening and closing silently as though desperately trying to communicate. A scream lodged itself in my throat as I recoiled violently, scrambling into the passenger seat. The figure stayed perfectly still, staring blankly, its breath fogging up the glass between us. As I struggled to calm myself, something else appeared in the shadows behind the figure. Another identical face emerging slowly into view, then another, and another. Soon, the trees were lined with countless pale figures, all standing motionless, hollow eyes fixed upon my car, surrounding me completely. My mind raced with disbelief and terror, heart pounding painfully in my chest. Suddenly, as if responding to an unseen signal, every figure simultaneously raised one hand, silently pointing toward the darkness behind them. With horror and disbelief, I glimpsed what they revealed. A clearing illuminated faintly by moonlight, revealing rusted, abandoned vehicles, dozens of them hidden deep in the forest, long forgotten and covered by overgrowth. Understanding gripped me with nauseating clarity. These figures were not here to harm me. They were warning me, desperately trying to show me the fate that awaited if I stayed. Suddenly, my headlights surged back to life, engine roaring without my touch. Overwhelmed by fear and gratitude, I slammed the accelerator down, the car jolting forward violently, narrowly, avoiding trees, as I sped desperately along the road until finally, hours later, I emerged from the woods, shaking uncontrollably. I never found that road again, despite numerous attempts to retrace my route. But even now, late at night, I still feel those hollow eyes watching from the shadows, forever grateful and forever haunted by their desperate warning. It was a chilly evening in early March of 2023, and I was making the long, solitary drive from Denver, Colorado to my family's house in Kansas City. I'd driven this route countless times before and usually enjoyed the solitude, but that night felt different from the start. Thick, heavy fog rolled in slowly after sunset, cloaking the highway in a ghostly veil and forcing me to slow down dramatically. Visibility dropped to nearly zero, and the road became empty as other drivers opted for safer stops. Stubbornly, I pressed on, determined to make good time. Mile after mile, the dense mist seemed to tighten around my car, giving everything an eerie, unnatural quality. My headlights barely penetrated the gloom, illuminating only short stretches of deserted road ahead. Despite blasting the heater, I felt oddly chilled, the temperature inside the car uncomfortably cold. I kept adjusting the controls, but nothing seemed to help. As I glanced nervously at the rearview mirror, I noticed something unsettling. My back window appeared fogged over completely, obscuring any view behind. Strange, I thought, considering my defroster had been on full blast for nearly an hour. With unease growing, I reached back awkwardly and wiped away some of the condensation with my hand. For a brief moment, relief washed over me when I saw nothing unusual outside. But as I settled back into my seat, a movement in the corner of my eye caused my heart to stutter painfully in my chest. Something had shifted slightly in the rearview mirror's reflection. A dark, indistinct shape sitting silently in the back seat. My breath froze in my throat, a scream dying instantly before it could escape. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I forced myself to glance again. This time, the seat appeared empty, just shadows cast by the faint dashboard lights. Convinced my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, I tried to focus on the road ahead. Minutes crawled by, my heart still racing, unable to shake the feeling of another presence in the car. Every few seconds, I'd nervously glance into the mirror, expecting to find the shadowy figure again, but each time, the seat remained empty, mocking my anxiety. Gradually, I convinced myself it had been imagination fueled by fatigue and fog-induced paranoia. But the relief didn't last long. Suddenly, the radio crackled violently, interrupting the silence with bursts of harsh static that startled me badly. Quickly, I switched it off, only to have it switch itself back on moments later, now tuned to a station playing strange, distorted whispers layered over distant, melancholic music. Panic surged again, and I desperately pressed buttons, but nothing responded. The eerie whispers grew louder, clearer, repeating fragments of sentences I couldn't quite understand, chilling me to the bone. Then, abruptly, the radio fell silent again, plunging the car back into oppressive quiet. As my pulse thundered painfully, I noticed something even more terrifying. The shadowy figure had reappeared in my rearview mirror, clearer this time, its outline unmistakably human, sitting perfectly still in the back seat. My knuckles whitened on the wheel as dread overwhelmed me. Every instinct screamed at me to stop the car, run, and escape into the night. But logic knew that wasn't an option. I was miles from anywhere, trapped on a deserted highway shrouded in thick, endless fog. I swallowed painfully, struggling to regain composure, telling myself it couldn't possibly be real. Slowly, cautiously, I shifted my eyes to the mirror again, gasping sharply. The figure had moved closer, now leaning forward slightly, its face hidden in deep shadow but undeniably watching me. I felt tears of sheer terror blur my vision, struggling to breathe, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Suddenly, the figure shifted again, this time stretching out an arm toward me. I braced for impact, expecting its icy touch any second, but instead, it merely pointed, directly ahead, toward something I hadn't yet noticed through the fog. Following its gesture, I squinted forward, my blood freezing instantly. Directly ahead, hidden until now, was an overturned semi-truck sprawled sideways across the highway, blocking both lanes completely, its outline barely visible in the thick mist. With seconds to spare, adrenaline surged through me and I slammed the brakes desperately, tires skidding wildly, narrowly missing the massive truck by mere inches. As the car finally came to rest, my heart thudded violently against my chest, hands trembling uncontrollably on the wheel. My body shook with delayed panic, lungs gasping for air. In the chaos, I'd momentarily forgotten the figure in the back seat, but as I slowly regained my breath, I dared another glance into the rearview mirror, bracing myself. The figure was gone, vanished without a trace, the back seat empty again as though it had never been occupied. Confusion replaced fear briefly, until I stepped cautiously out of my vehicle into the biting cold. Approaching the overturned truck, I saw with sickening clarity that it was no ordinary accident. The truck had plunged off the steep embankment above, crashing violently into the roadway. As emergency responders arrived later, one firefighter mentioned quietly that the accident had occurred hours earlier, claiming multiple lives instantly. A chill rippled through me, and I knew immediately. The shadowy figure wasn't a threat. It had been one of those victims, desperately trying to warn me of the tragedy ahead. But even now, months later, every time fog descends over an empty road, I can't help but glance nervously into the mirror. Terrified I'll see that dark silhouette once more, still trying to guide me away from an unseen danger. It was a humid evening in late July of 2021, and I'd been driving alone for nearly 12 hours straight from Austin, Texas, heading back home to Atlanta. My eyes burned with exhaustion, and my hands gripped the steering wheel as I fought to stay awake. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, the darkness only occasionally broken by dimly lit signs and sleepy towns flashing by like ghostly memories. With my eyelids growing heavier, I decided it was safer to find a place to rest than risk falling asleep at the wheel. After another few miles, a faded neon sign flickered into view, advertising a roadside motel just off the next exit. It looked run down, even from a distance, but I was desperate enough to stop anywhere. Pulling off the deserted highway, I guided my car toward the motel parking lot, gravel crunching beneath my tires. The motel itself was a small, single-story building with chipped paint and faded signs, its vacancy sign flickering erratically. As I parked, I noticed mine was the only car there, a detail that sent a chill down my spine, despite the summer heat. Stepping out into the muggy night, I walked quickly toward the tiny office. Inside, the air felt thick and stale, smelling faintly of mold and old cigarette smoke. The front desk was empty, illuminated only by a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. I hesitated for a moment, calling out softly, but no one answered. Just as I considered leaving, an elderly man emerged silently from a back room, moving stiffly as though each step caused him pain. Without a word, he slid a worn key across the counter, eyes never meeting mine. Too tired to question anything, I thanked him quietly and hurried toward my room at the far end of the motel, eager for sleep. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, revealing a cramped room that smelled strongly of mildew and disinfectant. The bed looked old, but clean enough, and at this point, that's all I cared about. Quickly locking the door behind me, I collapsed onto the mattress, exhaustion pulling me quickly into deep sleep. A few hours later, I awoke suddenly, heart racing inexplicably. The room felt colder than before, an unnatural chill prickling my skin despite the stifling July heat outside. Sitting up slowly, I glanced around, confused and disoriented, trying to pinpoint what had awakened me. Then I saw it. The door to my room stood slightly ajar, swaying gently as though someone had just slipped quietly outside. Panic surged instantly through my body. I'd been certain I'd locked it securely. Heart pounding, I jumped up, slamming the door shut and locking it again with trembling fingers. Convinced I wasn't alone, I began checking the small room frantically, glancing under the bed, behind the curtains, even inside the tiny bathroom. But there was nothing. Still, fear tightened around me like a vice, making sleep impossible. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, I decided to leave immediately, gathering my things hurriedly. As I opened the door, however, I stopped dead, heart freezing in terror. Parked directly next to my car was another vehicle, a rusted, battered sedan, its windows shattered and tires flat, clearly abandoned for years. It hadn't been there when I'd arrived earlier. Before I could process this fully, I heard a faint scratching noise from the other side of the parking lot, near the motel's empty swimming pool. Turning slowly, I glimpsed a figure standing motionlessly at the edge of the pool, cloaked in shadow. My pulse quickened. The figure appeared hunched, distorted somehow, its movements jerky and unnatural. Terrified, yet compelled by morbid curiosity, I stepped closer, trying to make out more clearly who or what it was. As I approached cautiously, the figure shifted abruptly, turning toward me. My breath caught painfully in my throat. It had no face, only a smooth, featureless blankness where eyes and mouth should be. Before I could scream, it moved swiftly toward me, limbs twitching grotesquely. I stumbled backward, crashing painfully into the ground. Scrambling to my feet, I sprinted toward the motel office, pounding frantically on the locked door, screaming desperately for help. But the building stood dark and silent, completely abandoned. Turning back toward the parking lot, I found the faceless figure standing mere feet away, silent and still, head tilted slightly as though observing me despite its lack of eyes. Suddenly, it raised one twisted hand, pointing directly to my motel room, its movements slow and deliberate. Understanding flooded me with nauseating clarity. It wanted me back inside that room. Paralyzed with fear, I stood frozen, watching helplessly as the figure slowly backed away, melting silently into the shadows. Finally gathering enough courage, I bolted toward my car, fumbling with the keys as I jumped in and slammed the door shut. My engine roared to life, tires spinning wildly as I sped away, desperate to escape. I never stopped again that night, driving straight through until dawn. Days later, safely home, curiosity compelled me to research the motel. What I found made my stomach twist painfully. The motel had been shut down for over a decade, abandoned after multiple guests vanished mysteriously. Their cars left parked exactly where mine had been. Horrified, I realized I had unknowingly spent the night in a place that no longer existed, a ghostly memory waiting patiently to claim yet another traveler. Even now, every time I drive past an empty roadside motel, chills ripple through my body, reminding me how close I came to becoming just another missing guest, trapped forever in a forgotten room. If these chilling car journey stories kept you at the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more true horror tales. Drive safe, and always check your rearview mirror.